When I was a teenager, I used to record cassette tape for friends, or most of the time for a girl I like. Hours of work, one copy made for one person. That tape meant something. Today, I can share a song with 6 billion people in 3 seconds, and somehow it means almost nothing. And that's the problem I want to talk about. The music industry made roughly 32 billion last year. The gaming industry, same internet, same technology, and same era, made 197 billion. One industry made this paradox and adapt, the other didn't. And the gap between those two choices is now 165 billions wide. Let me explain why that shit matters more than it seems. I would spend entire afternoons on those tapes. Side A, side B, every song title written by hand, the whole thing slipping into this little plastic case before I handed it to someone. I did it because I needed something to carry me through my commute to school every morning, which meant I had to get it right the first time, because once it was, the tape was recorded, it was done. There was no reshuffling the order at 7 a.m. because your mood had changed, or no slipping to a different, playlist mid-ride. You lived with your choices, which meant you actually had to make them carefully. And when I gave it to a friend, there was, this feeling of handing over something genuinely personal, something that had taken real time and real work to create. No likes, no comments, no algorithm deciding whether it was worth showing to anyone. It was just the music and the person I made it for. And here's the point. The cassette was scarce. There were just one. I made it specifically for you. And scarcity, as any economist will tell you, it's what gives things value. The rarer something is, the more it means to whoever receives it. But today, the scarcity is gone. And with it, something fundamental change about how music creates value. And that's the attention-monetization dilemma. And it's not just strangling the music industry, it's the central tension of the entire creator economy. Now, this tension was articulated really sharply by Chris Dixon, who is a partner at Hey 16Z, a big venture capital in the US, and probably one of the most interesting thinkers working at the intersection of technology and media right now. Dixon says creators today are caught in a fundamental trade-off between two things that seems like they should go together, but actually they pull in opposite direction: maximizing attention and maximizing money. Traditional media, the old school model I grew up with, always relied on scarcity to generate profit. Limited copies, controlled distribution, physical formats that you had to buy in a store. That's how value was maintained, and that's how money flowed to the people who made things. Then social media rewrote the rules entirely. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, these platforms created a system where more content flows into the internet every single day than anyone could ever consume. And the algorithm's job is to route that flow toward whatever keeps people scrolling the longest, which means the incentive is always toward more volumes, more frequency, and more output. And here's where it breaks down. The more the content you make and push into that system, the less scarce and therefore the less valuable your work becomes. The algorithm rewards volume, but volume is the enemy of value. It's like a structural trap, and most creators are stuck in it without fully understanding why. But Dixon doesn't stop at the diagnosis. He points to an industry that actually found its way out, and it's probably the last you would expect. The gaming industry. When platforms like Twitch started letting people broadcast themselves, playing video games to live audiences, the industry could have treated that like a piracy and shut it down, with Nintendo being probably the most famous example of that early resistance. But the smarter developers started asking a very different question. What is the attention generated by someone streaming our game in front of million viewers is actually worth more to us than the licensing fee we are missing out on? That was the question. So they started thinking what if we stop thinking about our product as just a game, and we start thinking about it as a bundle that includes the game, the community around it, the content ecosystem it generates, and the virtual goods that live inside it. That refrain changed everything. Fortnite became free to play, and Epic Games made billions selling cosmetic skins, digital items that don't affect the gameplay at all. But that players buy because they create a form of identity, a status within the community. Twitch became free to play, and the money followed through subscriptions, donations, and brand partnerships. What gaming figured out is that basically you can give away the thing that used to be scarce, the game itself, and rebuild scarcity at a different layer of the stack through limited virtual goods, exclusive access, time-gated content, things that exist in a digital form but behave economically like rare physically objects. So they squeezed the revenue balloon on one side and found new places to inflate it on the other. And the result of that flexibility, the willingness, to experiment and adapt, it's 197 billion in annual revenues on a trajectory that has never stopped climbing. By contrast, music spent most of the last 2 decades doing exactly the opposite of, adapting. Every time a startup tried to build something new at the intersection of music and technology, the label's default response was legal threat. They fought Napster, they resisted to early streaming services like Spotify in the beginning, and they created an environment so hostile to innovation that investors stopped making music tech companies altogether, because founders don't want to spend their time just, inventing, and investors don't want to back companies that are going to spend half probably of their runway just on litigation. The result is an industry where most of the products that exist are minor variation of product that existed like 20 years ago, while gaming spins up hundreds of new startups every single year because the environment actually allows experimentation. And then there are the numbers, which are almost hard to believe when you see them side by side. In 2025, the global recorded music industry hit roughly 32 billion, while gaming cleared 197 billion out of 150 million tracks spread across streaming platforms made by roughly 12 million artists. Only 22,000 of them earned more than 50,000 K, and that's on Spotify alone. The rest had their value absorbed by platforms, the labels, the algorithm. One industry embraced technology and the other litigated itself into, stagnation. And the gap between these two choices is now exactly over 165 billion wide. So what's actually the way out? Dixon answer, and I think he's probably right about it, it's programmable scarcity. The idea of embedding value into a digital asset, whether you can call it smart contract or NFTs, I know, bear with me, in a way generally ownable and generally rare, even inside a system that is otherwise infinitely replicable. Think about what that means in practice for an artist. Instead of uploading a track to Spotify and hoping the algorithm surfaces it into someone who cares, what if a fan could own a piece of that track or own access to exclusive experiences built around it in a way that gave them a real stake in its success? What if a person who shares music and pushes to the audience did so not just out of love, but because they can actually benefit when the work grows in value? That creates something that doesn't exist anywhere in the current streaming model. A collaborative relationship between the artist and the fans, where spreading music is economically meaningful for both sides, where the value doesn't evaporate into the platform, but stays within the community that actually cares. And look, this is what strikes me every time I think about it. People are already doing all this job, all this work every single day without even realizing it. Someone make a reel with the tracks in background that gets 100,000 views. Someone else builds a playlist that gets passed around the friend group for months. Someone sends the songs to the person they like, and that track ends up following that relationship for years. And that is real value created around, music, real attention being generated, real human connection happening. And none of it flows back to anyone. The fan is already doing the work of a distributor, of a marketer, of a tastemaker, and getting nothing in return except of the music itself. Nobody has never built a layer that recognizes that, and never before in industry have the tools to actually do it being this close. That's the question we started asking at Fankee at the end of 2024. What if the person who spread their music had actually skin in the game? We explored the blockchain route first, and hit every wall you would expect: regulatory complexity across jurisdiction, total absence of a clear legal framework, and above all the deep skepticism of the industry that watched the NFT boom and bust and wants nothing to do with that, even when the underlying idea is sound. So we are building toward that same goal without blockchain for now, knowing that it's probably the right long-term infrastructure, but not for the moment. The principle doesn't change. Let the internet do what it does best: copy, share, remix, distribute at scale, and build a layer of the genuine scarcity on top of it that belongs to the artist and the people who actually love their work. Gaming already proved this works. The playbook is sitting right there in plain sight. All it takes is the willingness to actually follow it. If you want to follow the journey, the thinking, the mistakes, what's actually working, subscribes, and stay close. And if you had a take on whether the music industry can actually pull things off, I would genuinely love to read it in the comments. See you next one.